Imagine a world where the story of Jesus is told not just by the four familiar Gospels, but by dozens of other texts, some of which paint a radically different picture of his life and teachings. What if there were hidden writings, discovered only centuries later, that offered alternate perspectives on the origins of humanity and the path to salvation? These texts are known as the apocryphal Gospels, and their existence challenges everything we thought we knew about the beginnings of Christianity. These Gospels, written in the first few centuries after Jesus' death, were once part of the broader Christian conversation. They were highly regarded by certain early Christian groups, yet they were eventually excluded from the New Testament canon. Why? The answer is not simple. Some of these texts contradicted the orthodox view of Jesus' divinity, others questioned the nature of sin and salvation, and some even suggested radically different ideas about human purpose in the cosmos. What makes these Gospels so intriguing is the window they provide into the diversity of thought in early Christianity. The canonical Gospels, the ones we are most familiar with, tell the story of Jesus as a miracle worker, the Son of God who sacrificed himself for the salvation of mankind. However, the apocryphal Gospels offer a different narrative. In these texts, Jesus is sometimes portrayed not as a divine savior, but as a teacher of hidden wisdom, offering insights into the inner workings of the soul and the nature of existence. These alternative texts reveal a world where Christianity was still evolving, and many different interpretations of who Jesus was and what his message meant were competing for attention. For instance, some apocryphal Gospels focus on secret knowledge, suggesting that salvation comes through understanding hidden truths about the universe, rather than through faith in the death and resurrection of Jesus. Other texts feature figures like Mary Magdalene, who in these writings plays a central role in the spiritual journey, challenging the gender and hierarchical norms of the early church. The discovery of these texts forces us to reconsider the origins of Christian belief, pushing us to question why certain writings were excluded and others canonized. What if the official story of Christianity, with its neatly packaged doctrines, only tells part of the truth? These Gospels suggest that early Christianity was not a monolithic faith, but a rich tapestry of ideas, beliefs, and debates. The apocryphal Gospels show us that the history of human beginnings and the path to salvation was far more complex and diverse than we might have ever imagined. The emergence of the apocryphal Gospels took place in a period of profound intellectual and spiritual ferment within the early Christian world. After the death of Jesus, numerous groups and sects began to form, each developing its own understanding of who Jesus was and what his message truly meant. This diversity was influenced by the broader socio-political and religious environment of the time, which was filled with competing philosophies, mysticism, and other religious movements. In the centuries following Jesus' crucifixion, Christianity was not yet a unified religion with a clear set of beliefs or doctrines. Various Christian communities, spread across the Roman Empire, began to record their own experiences and interpretations of Jesus' teachings. Some communities, especially those with a more mystical or Gnostic worldview, produced Gospels that were highly philosophical and concerned with the inner spiritual life. These texts often emphasized personal revelation and the pursuit of secret knowledge as the true path to salvation. One notable aspect of the historical context is the ongoing struggle for authority within early Christianity. The development of Christian doctrine was a contested process, with different leaders and groups vying for control over how the faith should be practiced and understood. As a result, many early Christian writings were scrutinized and either accepted or rejected based on their alignment with the beliefs that would later be considered orthodox. The apocryphal Gospels often diverge from the theological ideas that came to dominate the mainstream Christian tradition. They frequently introduced new ideas about creation, the human soul, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. Some of these texts, such as those associated with Gnostic thought, posited that the material world was the result of a flawed or lesser deity, while others presented a more mystical or symbolic view of the creation story. These writings challenged the early Christian establishment and were ultimately excluded from the biblical canon, but they continue to offer a rich and alternative perspective on the origins of human spirituality and the development of Christian thought. Among the apocryphal Gospels, one of the most influential and enigmatic is the Gospel of Thomas. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which recount the narrative of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, the Gospel of Thomas presents itself as a collection of sayings, or logia, attributed to Jesus. These sayings are not woven into a narrative, but rather stand as isolated teachings that invite reflection and interpretation. The text is often considered one of the earliest examples of Christian mysticism, offering insights into the inner nature of Jesus' message. The Gospel of Thomas is particularly significant for its emphasis on knowledge, or gnosis, as the key to salvation. In this text, Jesus does not primarily come to offer a path of atonement or forgiveness through his death, as seen in the canonical Gospels, but instead presents the pursuit of hidden wisdom as the way to understand the true nature of reality. The text suggests that by knowing one's true self and the divine nature of the universe, an individual can transcend the limitations of the material world and achieve spiritual liberation. This focus on personal enlightenment and inner transformation contrasts sharply with the sacrificial theology that later became central to mainstream Christianity. For the authors of the Gospel of Thomas, salvation was not about external events like crucifixion and resurrection, but about an inward journey of self-discovery. The idea that knowledge of the self and the divine could lead to salvation was central to many Gnostic sects, which viewed the material world as a trap for the soul. The Gospel of Thomas reflects this Gnostic worldview, presenting a vision of humanity's origins and destiny that differs from the more common Christian doctrine of original sin and redemption through Christ's death. The text's exclusion from the New Testament canon reflects the early church's move toward a more orthodox and institutionalized theology. Yet the Gospel of Thomas remains an important document, providing a window into the early Christian struggle to define the nature of salvation and the role of knowledge in the human spiritual journey. Another notable apocryphal gospel that offers a unique viewpoint on early Christian teachings is the Gospel of Mary. This text, attributed to Mary Magdalene, provides a compelling perspective on spirituality, the nature of the soul, and the path to salvation. What sets this gospel apart is its emphasis on Mary Magdalene as a key spiritual figure, one who not only follows Jesus but is portrayed as a close confidante and a possessor of profound wisdom. This contrasts with the more traditional portrayal of Mary Magdalene in the canonical Gospels, where she is often cast in the role of a penitent sinner or follower. In the Gospel of Mary, Mary Magdalene emerges as an authoritative teacher, imparting insights into the nature of the soul and its journey toward liberation. The text emphasizes that true spiritual awakening comes from within, highlighting the importance of inner knowledge and self-awareness in understanding the divine. This view aligns with the Gnostic tradition, which emphasized personal, direct experiences of the divine as opposed to reliance on external rituals or beliefs. Through Mary's teachings, the Gospel suggests that salvation is achieved not by adhering to external law, but by transcending the material world and understanding the spiritual realm. The text also introduces a tension between Mary and the male disciples, particularly Peter, who questions her authority to teach and interpret the message of Jesus. This conflict reflects deeper debates within early Christianity about the role of women in the spiritual community and their right to hold leadership positions. The Gospel of Mary, in this sense, not only challenges established theological ideas but also confronts social and gender norms, presenting a vision of early Christian teachings that gives prominence to a woman's role in the transmission of spiritual wisdom. The Gospel of Mary was excluded from the New Testament, in part due to its unconventional teachings and its emphasis on feminine spiritual authority. However, this text offers an essential and often overlooked perspective on the diversity of early Christian thought, particularly with regard to the role of women in the early church and the nature of spiritual knowledge. Among the most controversial and provocative apocryphal texts is the Gospel of Judas. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which portray Judas Iscariot as the betrayer of Jesus, this Gospel presents a radically different account of his role in the narrative. In this text, Judas is not a villain but a necessary participant in the divine plan. His actions, far from being an act of treachery, are portrayed as part of a higher spiritual purpose designed to fulfill God's will and bring about the true understanding of Jesus' message. The Gospel of Judas presents a Gnostic interpretation of Christian teachings with a focus on the distinction between the material and spiritual worlds. It asserts that the physical world and the human body are prisons for the soul, which can only be liberated through knowledge of the divine. Judas, in this Gospel, is depicted as the only disciple who fully grasps Jesus' secret teachings and understands the true nature of the cosmos. By betraying Jesus, he helps facilitate the release of Jesus' divine essence, allowing him to transcend his earthly body and return to the spiritual realm. This portrayal of Judas as an enlightened figure challenges traditional Christian notions of sin and salvation. It turns the story of the betrayal upside down, suggesting that Judas' actions were not a betrayal in the conventional sense, but a necessary act to fulfill the divine plan. The text aligns with Gnostic thought, which sees knowledge, rather than faith or ritual, as the path to salvation. Judas' role in the gospel is not one of damnation but of spiritual elevation. His actions, though misunderstood by the other disciples, are seen as integral to the cosmic unfolding of the divine order. The Gospel of Judas, like many other apocryphal texts, was excluded from the canon because its teachings conflicted with the emerging orthodoxy of the early church. Its radical reinterpretation of Judas' role and its Gnostic perspective on the nature of existence provide a striking contrast to the Orthodox view, offering an alternative narrative of salvation and human origins. Another fascinating text within the collection of apocryphal Gospels is the Gospel of Philip, a work deeply rooted in Gnostic thought and rich with symbolic language. Unlike the narrative Gospels, which focus on the life and resurrection of Jesus, this text is a meditative exploration of spiritual mysteries, emphasizing the union of the divine and human. The Gospel of Philip is particularly known for its teachings on the nature of Christ, the sacraments, and the hidden knowledge that leads to spiritual awakening. One of the central themes of the Gospel of Philip is the concept of syzygy, a term used in Gnostic tradition to describe the union of opposites, such as the divine and human or male and female. In this Gospel, the union of these dualities is seen as essential for spiritual enlightenment and salvation. This theme is notably explored in the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, who is portrayed as a central figure in the spiritual life of the early Christian community. The Gospel hints at a special, almost intimate connection between them, often interpreted as a symbolic representation of the sacred marriage between the divine and the material. The Gospel of Philip also offers a unique perspective on the sacraments, particularly baptism and the Eucharist. It teaches that these rituals, while outwardly simple, carry profound spiritual significance. Rather than being mere acts of obedience, the sacraments are seen as pathways to the deeper, hidden truths of the universe. In this way, the Gospel aligns with Gnostic teachings that emphasize the importance of inner spiritual transformation rather than external acts of piety. This Gospel's focus on hidden knowledge, spiritual union, and the sacredness of human relationships reflects a distinctive worldview that stands in contrast to the mainstream Christian teachings that were later canonized. It offers an intriguing alternative vision of the Christian faith, one that emphasizes the mysticism and esoteric teachings that were often sidelined in the early development of Christian doctrine. The Gospel of Philip remains an important text for understanding the diversity of early Christian thought and the spiritual ideas that challenged the formation of orthodox beliefs. The Gospel of Truth stands as a key text within the Gnostic tradition, offering a profound reinterpretation of Christian theology that diverges sharply from the narratives found in the canonical scriptures. At its core, this gospel is an exploration of the relationship between ignorance and knowledge, darkness and light, and how these forces shape human existence. It presents a vision of salvation not as the forgiveness of sins, but as the realization of truth, which leads to spiritual liberation. One of the key themes of the Gospel of Truth is the idea that humanity is trapped in a state of ignorance, often depicted as a form of darkness or error. This ignorance is seen as the source of human suffering and separation from the divine. The gospel argues that it is only through the attainment of knowledge, specifically the knowledge of the true nature of God and the cosmos, that individuals can break free from this ignorance and be reconciled with the divine source. This process of enlightenment is viewed as a return to the original state of unity with God, a state lost through ignorance and sin. The gospel of truth also introduces a distinctive understanding of the role of Jesus Christ. In this gospel, Jesus is not merely a sacrificial figure who dies to atone for humanity's sins, but a divine teacher who reveals the truth that has been hidden from humanity since the beginning of time. His role is to bring knowledge, not through ritual or sacrifice, but through the revelation of hidden wisdom that awakens the soul to its true nature. Jesus is portrayed as the bringer of light, guiding humanity out of the darkness of ignorance and into the radiant understanding of the divine. This text reflects the Gnostic belief that salvation is an inner journey, driven by the pursuit of esoteric knowledge rather than external faith or practices. The gospel of truth, like other apocryphal gospels, was excluded from the biblical canon, primarily due to its radical departure from the developing orthodoxy of early Christianity. However, it provides an important window into the diverse spiritual ideas circulating in the early centuries of the Church and offers an alternative vision of redemption through the transformative power of knowledge. The apocryphal Gospels, though excluded from the New Testament, continue to offer profound insights into the early diversity of Christian thought. They present a range of beliefs and interpretations that challenge the mainstream narratives, showing us that the early Christian world was not as monolithic as often depicted. These texts invite us to reconsider the role of hidden wisdom, personal transformation, and spiritual knowledge in the quest for understanding our place in the divine order. What's fascinating about these lost teachings is their persistence throughout history. Even though many of these gospels were marginalized, their themes such as the quest for inner enlightenment, the divine nature of humanity, and the mystical union between the spiritual and material worlds have endured in various forms. From Gnostic philosophy to the modern New Age movement, these ancient texts continue to influence thinkers, spiritual seekers, and scholars who question the established religious doctrines. Moreover, the exclusion of these Gospels from the canonical Bible doesn't necessarily diminish their importance. In fact, it raises important questions about why certain texts were chosen and others were left out. Were these alternative views too radical for the early church? Or did they offer a more inclusive vision of salvation, one that emphasized the individual's journey towards self-awareness and spiritual awakening? The lost Gospels leave us with much to ponder, offering a more nuanced view of the early Christian landscape. As we reflect on these teachings, it's essential to approach them with an open mind, understanding that spirituality is not a one-size-fits-all concept. These Gospels remind us that the journey to understanding our existence and our connection with the divine is diverse, multifaceted, and deeply personal. If you found this exploration of hidden Christian texts interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights into the forgotten histories of spirituality. Stay curious, and let the search for knowledge guide your path forward.